You muted.
I've been on so many of these calls, I didn't think I was muted. Usually it's the other way around. Y'all doing all right?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Doing great.
Nice, nice.
It's 8, probably wait like 2 more minutes, just let people start to log on. Usually it's 18 to 35 people, but it's YouTube live stream too, so there's no telling how many people actually view it. And then a lot of like the Rising Coaches members go back and view it at later times also. So just to give you a heads up. And then like I said, it's Unspoken Topics, but tonight is the Coach Gould and Dr. G show. So whatever direction it goes, let's just take it that way. So.
And this is your last show?
I think I'm gonna do one more next week to just do a summary of everything, and just summarize the 5 shows and give out a lot of the nuggets that I took just as like a recap, and then bring on two professional players and just give the coaches really a perception of, now that they're pros and their career is over, what things would they want to do different or do the same that they took from their coaches in order to make them the best pros now that they know. So like me and a lot of our guys, we talk about like diet is a big thing right now. And Carlos, who was my point guard in college, he's still playing professionally. And we was just talking like, man, if I just knew about diet, it was something that was never introduced to me as a player, or different things about speed and those things. So just to give the coaches things to consider and think about in order just to make their players better.
Right. Well, at Eastern, we couldn't afford to teach you guys about diet.
Hey, if you go there now, they got some of the best facilities in the country.
Right.
It's crazy. So we'll wait one more minute and we'll get going.
Bro.
I'm gonna introduce, and then Coach, you'll go first, and then Dr. G, you'll go second. And then after that, I ask both of you a question. We'll open it up to the audience and just make it just genuine dialogue from there.
No problem. And you still want like a little bit of the background?
Yeah, I'm just gonna run down your resume, but you can talk about like if there was significant moments during that time or something that you took away from those times, feel free.
No problem.
So a lot of the coaches on here, they really want to know like what paths, and we know everybody's path is different.
Okay.
Let's do it. Kareem, you ready?
I'm ready.
We live?
You're good.
All right. First, I want to thank everybody for joining week 5 of Unspoken Topics, where we like to have epic conversations. So epic really being educating professionals and integrating cultures. Just really having a conversation that's going to make our profession better. Looking at the way that society is, the way that our coaching profession is set up, and finding a way to give everybody a chance to grow and develop. This week's topic will be likeness and image. And as always, I want to give a shout out to Rising Coaches for creating this platform for coaches to improve. The group that has a tree for the treeless, those guys and coaches that don't come from trees like Calipari or Boheim or Beeline and those guys. So just grateful for their platform and grateful for those that have joined, just finding a way to improve and educate those around us. Our first speaker for tonight is Coach Marlon Gould. He has a bachelor's in journalism, has a master's in athletic leadership. His background is 5 seasons as an assistant at Ryder, 7 seasons as an assistant at Petersburg, as the assistant coach and recruiting coordinator, 1 year at Eastern Connecticut State. He's also been a recruiting basketball analyst for Rivals.com and worked in the ESPN basketball department. He's also worked with AAU on the AAU grassroots circuit with Connecticut Basketball Club. Our second speaker is Dr. Derek Gregg. He has his bachelor's in human development. his master's in sports administration, and his doctorate in higher education and administration. He's also the leader of Racial Equality Action Group for the AAC. His background is 7 years as the AD at Tulsa University, 7 years at Eastern Michigan as the athletic director, 6 years at University of Arkansas as the associate AD, 3 years at Michigan as the associate AD of compliance, 3 years at Missouri as the associate AD of compliance, 2 years at Vanderbilt as an academic advisor, played Division I football at Vanderbilt. In 2015, he wrote his first book on 40 Days of Direction, on life lessons from the talented 10. And before we get started, he sent me this video that was made by his son. And for me, Dr. Greg is really inspiration to me and somebody that's near and dear to me, along with Coach Gould. Dr. G is somebody who was my athletic director growing up, as a student athlete at Eastern Michigan. And I've just watched him as a Black male in America just impact the sports world each day with very powerful blows. And then Coach Gould, who I've known for a little over 2 weeks, has reached out to me for one of my players, and through our dialogue and conversation has been so genuine and so real and so like-minded of how we communicate. It was someone who I felt like when we talk about likeness and image, he had to end up on the show. Both are very profound in their profession, and really interested to see what their opinion and expression is on likeness and image. So before we start, I want to show this 2-minute video, and then we'll get to our conversation.
Thing to see is that person that's in the mirror, because you got to be willing to hear what you don't want to hear. Let's just start with the word uncomfortable. This is the most in-depth and uncomfortable conversation I've had about this since this has been going on.
Honestly, it's sad that it's taken this long to press into the conversation.
A lot of people don't know how to actually have a conversation.
Being silent is, I think, more dangerous. Not to talk about it. You know, you're not doing any good not talking about it.
Communication is the key. And if we're not communicating about our feelings, if we're not communicating about what we feel is wrong or what we feel is right, then we're doing each other an injustice.
I just don't feel like it's black versus white. I feel like it's good versus bad. I feel like it's real versus fake.
We are all the same. God made us all his creation. He made us, so like what make you better than me?
We have to have unity. Black people, white people, Hispanic, Asian, everybody else who makes up what we call the American melting pot.
I identify as a black man.
Half Hispanic and half white.
White male, Nigerian, black man. Muskogee Creek, Indian, black man.
He's a white female.
African American. She's a professional white woman.
Biracial. I'm African American. Black student athlete in America.
How do you identify? We're all different, but we're all the same. And what's in our heart is what's going to carry us through.
I'm finding that it's the conversations that matter.
So the purpose of the show is to educate professionals and integrate cultures. And a lot of that happens with very tough conversations. Stop this.
But it never gets old. Pack everyone in the car and head out to the beach.
Are you surprised JR is getting another shot?
Sorry about that. Can everybody see me still?
Yep, good.
So educating professionals and integrating cultures, and it starts with the conversations that people really don't want to have. And I just found it important to have these conversations in order to improve, because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know, be it systemic racism, be it the difference between a recruiting coach considered a black coach and an X's and O's coach considered a white coach. At the end of the day, in the coaching world and the coaching profession, we're impacting the future leaders of our lives, of the world. And if we can find a way to make ourselves better, be it black, white, Mexican, male side, female side, then we're gonna find a way to have the best profession in the world. So as we get started, Coach Gould, you'll be first. And like I said, the topic is likeness and image, but we want to feel your thumbprint on the coaching profession.
Oh, no, not a problem. You know, before we go on, I'm gonna help Coach Lewis out on this one. It's all right. It's pronounced Guild, so it's all good, man. We'll get past that. But for me, like Coach Lewis said, Marlon Gill, this was just my 5th year here at Ryder. We're in the Metro Atlantic Conference here in the Northeast. Had a pretty good year. Went 18-12. Had some good players, and as we all know, it's often about the players. You got good players, you got a chance to win. And then prior to that, I was at St. Peter's University on the same conference for 7 years. We had a chance to go to the NCAA tournament in 2011. And prior to that, started my career at the Division III level at Eastern Connecticut State in Willimantic, Connecticut. So for me, the biggest thing to be able to talk to everybody here today, it's an honor because I've been blessed to be put in this situation. I tell everybody this, for everyone that's trying to aspire to be a coach and just get into the profession, biggest thing for me that I try to tell young people, I'm 37 and I've never had a job. So I start by saying that this is fun to me. It just happens that I'm allowed to be paid for it because I would do it for free. And with that, I like to pay that forward to other guys that are coming up. So having platforms like this to talk to everybody is great because when I first started, things like this weren't around. And I think that's the biggest thing that's important for us now in pushing these messages forward, paying it forward, bringing everybody together, and just trying to get us to just be on the same page, whether it's race. Now, obviously, athletics is the thing that brings us together, but, we can learn from one another and teach one another through different forms of sport. The image and likeness thing, obviously, it's been something that's been talked about. I'd even say I first heard about it probably in 1995, when I was 12 years old. It started with, some of you might be familiar with Ed O'Bannon over at UCLA. EA Sports used his image on the cover of their college basketball game, and he didn't see a dime from it. I understood it back then, to not have image and likeness, but now, with so much money that's being generated by the NCAA, I do think, players should be compensated for that. Where it gets tricky is who's compensated what. So obviously, we understand that at the Power 5 schools, the monies that can be divvied out there are totally different than what's being divvied out at the mid-major, low major, Division IIs, Division IIIs. And I think that's where sometimes things might get lost in translation of, all right, well, I'm going to go to the Kentuckys of the world or the Dukes of the world because they can pay me the most. Well, they can't pay everybody. So you can probably pay your top 2 players, but now what deciphers who your top 2 players are? So I think moving forward, that kind of opens up the floodgates for mid-major programs. If this image and likeness thing comes about, why can't we at Ryder recruit a kid that's maybe a high major and guarantee him one of those top spots that maybe a Power 5 school could have? And like we've been seeing with, social media, guys promoting themselves to the HBCUs and things of that nature, all it takes is one guy to make a move like that, to say, hey, let me go check out what Ryder's doing. If they can maximize my brand, why wouldn't I try to go there as opposed to going to a Kentucky or a Duke? Will it happen? I don't know, but why not take a shot at that? And I think you've seen a couple states, sign off on allowing this to happen. And if it does, I welcome it because it's something different. Like we've seen through the course of time, things change. Businesses expand. And this is just another form of that, in my opinion.
Dr. G, feel free.
Absolutely. And all the coaches on this call, first of all, don't ever underestimate your importance. The first Black man that ever really affected my life was a coach, not my own dad, who I didn't grow up around. It was a coach, Coach Bob Harris, who coached me in football and basketball and baseball too. So you are very important. The thing about me, I've been a lifelong administrator. This is my 28th year in this business. This is all I've ever done. I'm a lifer. I thought I wanted to coach back when I first got started, but actually my head coach from the time talked me out of it. And he said, you know, I think you can become an athletic director. And I hardly even knew what an athletic director was at the time. I was an academic counselor, you know, watching over guys, a lot of the guys who looked like me. But that was the first person that put that in my head. And that was another coach who influenced me and really changed my life. So again, don't underestimate your importance. You're critical to what the enterprise is. And to me, I always say it. I say great programs aren't built off guys like me. They're built off of coaches. But bad programs are built off coaches too. And when you get into this name, image, and likeness thing, part of my background, as you heard Travis say, I'm one of the few athletic directors in the country that has a compliance background. A lot of these guys are business people or they raise some money. And so people think that they can run an athletic department, but I worked my way up, ground up, like a lot of us have to, and didn't miss anything along the way. Because, you know, a lot of times, and we can get into a lot of this, a lot of times when it comes to us, they look at what we haven't done rather than what we've done. So keep that in mind and make yourself well-rounded. But the name, image, and likeness thing, my eyes were open. I played football at Vanderbilt, started working at Vanderbilt, and then I went to the University of Missouri where I worked for Joe Castiglione, who is now the AD at Oklahoma. A lot of people don't even know that he was the AD there before he went to Oklahoma. But my eyes were really open when I went to the University of Michigan as a compliance guy. It was supposed to be on the heels of the Fab Five craziness. So I got there the year after the last Fab Five guy left, but I got to know almost every one of those guys through the situations that were caused, not so much by them, but you know, a gentleman named Ed Martin, who I gained some respect for. You know, we're all from the same place, even though I'm from the country, and you know that was Detroit. We understand each other, and so at least I understood what was going down and what happened around those times. Now, and then we had Jamal Crawford. A lot of people don't remember that Jamal Crawford came to Michigan for a year, and some negative things went down around him. And I told Jamal at the time, I said, "You're going to be a guinea pig." I said, I think a lot of these rules are going to change because of you. And if you remember that situation, it was about 7 or 8 other kids around the country that got popped, big time basketball players who had to sit out, and those things around some of the benefits that they received at the time. So now we've come full circle. I've seen this thing come full circle. And when you get into the NIL, as a former student athlete, I'm all for it. I'm all for anything that helps student athletes, particularly if they can help themselves, help their family, help their brand. I've come full circle on that. But the other part of me says that every time a good rule is passed, people are going to start breaking it. And so when they start breaking it, though, what happens is the kid himself or herself are the ones who are going to be mostly affected by it or negatively affected by it. So we have to make sure that we educate everybody. Coach mentioned that a lot of these states have passed rules on the NIL. The NCAA has something coming out, but it's probably going to take a lot of bureaucracy in the NCAA. It's probably going to take another year for them to get everything up and running. But a lot of these state rules don't start until about 2 years from now anyway. So I think a lot of the states did it to put some pressure on the NCAA. But I'm all for example, student athletes getting the model apparel, getting to provide lessons for camps, which you should be able to do that. That's a skill set you have. You should be able to benefit from that. Personal appearances, selling autographs, even down to like this championship ring I'm wearing, even if you want to sell that. So it's your personal property. You should be able to benefit off of it the way that you want to. So I've come around on a lot of those things, but I'm more wary of the local business person that's a booster who's been giving guys money under the table. We all know about that. And so a rule like this kind of legitimizes him being able to give Johnny Quarterback $100,000 to promote his business throughout the year. So we have to make sure that we arm these people and their families with the right information, have them select professionals who are going to look out for their best interests. Because a lot of people, as you know, and in particular in basketball, it's grimy. It can be grimy. Our Adidas rep, who is a really good guy, he called me right when everything, I know we're going to get into George Floyd, but when that situation went down, he called to ask me how I was doing. And then he said, I'm calling a lot of African Americans around the country that I really respect. And I said, hey, I appreciate that. And he said, well, what can I do? I said, listen, I said, I know a lot about the situations because I'm a basketball. I grew up at Michigan. I grew up being the compliance guy, Michigan, Missouri, and Arkansas. I have seen and been involved in everything that you can possibly think of. So I said, instead of your company, and I was polite, putting money in the wrong places and getting a lot of our kids and people into trouble, why don't you put some of that money into the neighborhoods legitimately, support them, support youth programs, support sports and all those things. And so as a matter of fact, you've seen that Adidas is donating a lot of money back to some of these neighborhoods. They followed Nike, but I texted him the other day and I thanked him for that because I know he had a lot to do with it. So, again, I've done this for a long time with a lot of different people, been involved with a lot of different situations. I'm pretty much an open book and will tell you whatever I can that isn't a court record somewhere.
Both very good perspectives. And I want to work on two sides of it. I want to work on, from a coaching standpoint, your image as a coach, the kind of things and your expectations with your current layout. So for those who don't know, for Coach, he's at Ryder and their entire staff is African-American. Dr. Greg obviously is an African-American athletic director. So from a personal and professional perspective, as well as the perspective of the likeness and image with the NCAA. The first being, how do we educate our players? Because me as a player, right, I played Division I football and Division I basketball. When the EAA Sports came out with basketball games or video games, I just went to GameStop and waited, and we were excited to see what our rating was and what our ranking was. It never entered our mind that, hey, somebody was making money off of us at that time, right? Not until the Northwestern group came about and they started to go after EA Sports and those things. So for so many, like, we just want to get a good education, right? We want to go to the right fit that's going to help us get a good degree, that's going to put us in a position to better ourselves. But you only have, then you have that 15 to 20%. I just seen yesterday, Imani Bates started the IPSY prep school, right? Because of his ability. And that's just a small percentage of what's happening. So how do you separate the lines of educating those who are naive to even think outside of the box on likeness and image, and then those that's their primary thought process?
I'll take that first. I think you hit it on the head of educating guys. So for us, we have 13 guys, right? Now, obviously, player 1 is different from player 13 for whatever the reason may be. But I think you have to educate both of them, the good and the bad, and just say, hey, listen, our starting point guard is the marquee name to the program, right? He'll probably get more looks than player 13. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that'll go on everywhere. And that's why I say at the Power 5 schools, you might only have 2-3 guys that can capitalize at the highest level of what it is they can collect, right? So now, what does that do for a school like Kentucky that recruits 5-star guys every year? All those guys aren't going to get the same piece of the pie, unfortunately. And I think once we start educating those guys on that particular part of it and how it's going to be broken down, I think that opens up the doors for other schools to go and get guys. But now, like Dr. Greg said, you got to be aware of who's going to break the rules, because it's going to be somebody that's going to try to manipulate that system. But I think early on, if you come with the education of letting these guys know that, hey, listen, it's a business now, and you have to be aware of that what this guy's getting will probably be different from what it is you're getting, but then at the same time, letting them know like, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. You can probably get to that, but you got to put the work in, and you can't be upset with it. But then the part that's often forgotten about is what happens if that young man signs a bad deal? How does he get out of it? And I think that's where we come in as coaches, that if we're doing this for the right reasons of wanting the betterment of student athletes, we got to give them the real, the good and the bad, and let them know that, hey, if you sign a screwed up deal, we're going to have to sit down. It's going to be some consequences that come along with that. And we just got to figure out a plan to get you out of it. But it has to be both sides of the coin. Everybody's got to be willing to educate and listen, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, what's changed, I keep saying changed the game a lot, is the internet, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. The kids don't even look at Facebook anymore, so we don't have to worry about that. But I'll give you a great example of someone, like Coach said, the kid at the end of the bench, who was one of our football players, and he did play a little bit, but Bishop Louis. This kid's name is Bishop Louis, and anybody who's into hip hop, you may have even heard about him already. I went to a softball tournament. Our softball team made the NCAA regionals a couple of years ago over in Stillwater, Oklahoma, middle of nowhere country. I go to this Mexican restaurant, and I have on a Tulsa shirt, with the logo, and I sit down, and one of the waiters came over and he said, "Hey, University of Tulsa, what do you do there?" I said, "I'm the athletic director there." He said, "Bishop Louis." And I said, "Wow." I said, you know about Bishop?" He said, "Yeah, Bishop Louis, long and short of it is, he played 4 years at Tulsa. Kid's about 5'6", fast, but he got on the field and played a little bit. But he is basically a YouTube sensation. This kid and another one of our former players who played before him, and all they do is they rate hip hop videos. They play video games and rate those, but people just love their personality. And these kids are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing that. And so now what it shows you is that everybody has a brand. Everybody's not going to be Zion. We know that at least he's getting caught up on what he would have made in college now. But with these new rules, with you being able to maximize your own brand and self-promote, and you don't need a lot of money to start things up these days, particularly if you're using the internet. So I think it's going to be a positive thing, but it's also going to be a distraction, because this means that not only are the two best guys on the team, or the best two ladies, and it's not just men either. I know some women on here. I did some research on this. There are 4 female student athletes, 4 or 5 of them at UCLA, who are ranked in about the top 20 as far as Instagram followers, what their net worth could be if they maximize that. So there's going to be a lot out there that we really have to arm ourselves with the right education and the right information to give to these kids.
Yeah, that kind of leads into the next question. If you are marketing and branding yourself as a player, and then the fans start to come for that person that's being marketed for player number 11, how much pressure does that put on coaching staffs? Does that put on athletic departments? Does that put on an institution to make sure that player is seen? Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of what we're talking about, all of what we're talking about, is based off of money. And if an athletic department is bringing an extra 5,000 people to sit at a basketball game, to sit at a football game because they came to see player XYZ because of his marketability, how much pressure does that put on staffs and athletic departments to get him on the field or on the floor?
Well, I'll let Coach go. I don't control playing time, so I'll let him talk about that.
Well, for us, we've already started to brainstorm ideas how to handle that. And like I said, it really comes back to one, educating, but having an open dialogue with your players. We've spoken to them a little bit about it this summer, just ways, and we let them think of ways of, hey, how can we market you better? What do you guys think? And some of the ideas that they've come up with, we've said, okay, we can do that. Then there's some ideas where we're like, all right, no, that's a little outlandish. But I'll give you guys an example. We had Stevie Jordan was our starting point guard this past year. And for those of you that you guys probably know his dad, Love and Hip Hop, and any one of those other shows on VH1. But Stevie has about 120,000 followers, 120,000 followers on Instagram alone. So we weren't naive to the point that they were just coming to see the show. Like, it's his dad coming to a game. And the messed up part to that was Stevie Jordan can actually play basketball. He was a great player for us here at Rider. And we knew some of the doors that were being opened for him. And at the time, I know like VH1 would want to send him checks for being on his dad's show, and he couldn't do it until he left college. So putting those kind of plans in place for these guys on, hey man, let's try to capitalize off this. And when the time's right, you can collect what it is that you're owed. But putting that, like I said, putting that right plan in place is essential. And we've started that. I don't want to give everything away, but there've been some things that we've spoken about as a staff and as an athletic department on what we do with this upcoming year, if there is a year, on how to handle that.
On my first show, I talked a lot about systemic racism, and I talked about the importance of degree selection, right? A lot of times guys get recruited to go to college, and we produce in college so many communications degrees, so many general studies degrees, so many degrees that produce substitute teachers, right? And then when you think about likeness and image, and Coach, you kind of just touched on putting a plan in place for afterwards. But I think as an athletic department, how do we put in place resources or personnel or staff to help educate our guys on how to get the most out of their opportunities, be it social media, followers, video games, post-graduation, like what goes into building them to make money off of this when it's over, educate them on the proper ways to make money. Because from a degree selection, it seems to me a lot of times coaches and institutions we got to make sure that we're graduating kids. We got to make sure that we meet our numbers for graduation so we don't lose scholarships. And that's hurting us. That's hurting student athletes that go get a Vanderbilt degree, a Michigan degree, a Rider degree from all these great institutions, and it has no financial value to it. So what things can we do over a 4-year period of time to help them gain financial value in the long run?
Okay, I'll start with that one. And this one, I look at it two different ways. When I went to Vanderbilt University, I started out as an engineering student. And honestly, that lasted about a semester. Well, to me, it really lasted after I took my first calculus test and I flunked that. So I knew right off the bat, trying to be a big time SEC football player, the engineering thing, I came from an engineering town, Huntsville, Alabama. I had this internship with NASA. All I had to do was graduate and they were going to give me a job. But I realized very quickly that I wasn't going to make it out of that program. Back then, unlike now, as you know, every athletic department has to have an athletic academic support system like you came through, Trav. But back then, they recruited us at Vanderbilt saying, oh, you're a smart guy. You should come here. We don't do study table. But after that first semester, myself and about 6 or 7 of us, all Black, went to the coaching staff and said, hey, if you don't put some type of system around us, we're not going to make it here. And so we take a little credit for creating that program there. And what I tell guys now is, regardless of the value of the degree, it would be a shame for a basketball, football player, full scholarship student athlete to leave an institution after 4 or 5 years without at least one degree in something. Because, and one part of it is, over the course of your lifetime, no matter what you graduate in, you're going to make about $1.5 million more than a high school graduate, regardless of what you do. So let's just look at it from an economic standpoint. I graduated with a human development degree. I really can't even tell you what that entails to this day, but I was able to stair step it, get yourself a master's degree that may be a little bit more meaningful. My kid just graduated from from Tulsa. He played ball there. Now he's working on his MBA. So maybe you go that route. Maybe you go to law school, which I did that for 1 year. Wasn't successful, didn't like it. Went back and got involved in athletics, worked on a master's, and then I got a doctorate. So, but you can't get a doctorate or can't get into med school unless you major and graduate in something. So even if it's general, whatever, we have an organizational studies degree here. Let's make a 3.0 in that. Let's get into grad school. Let's try to take that thing further. But you cannot come here. Our first rule of thumb when I tell recruits, and I've been involved with recruiting just like a lot of you for the last 28 years. The first thing is to come to college, go to class, because a lot of people skip that, obtain knowledge, and graduate. No matter what you do, and leave here with a degree, because you'll be able to build on that.
Dr. Greg is right on with that. And it's funny, I just had a conversation with a young man. He's an alum here of Rider, and he's working on this project, played overseas for 13 years, and now he's working on a project, and he's just trying to find out how to go about getting that project out to everyone. Will it succeed? The steps that he needs to take to get to that point. And I told him this. I said, hey, man, like, for everything that you've done for this university, you kind of put it back on them. And what I mean by that is, hey, let somebody know what it is you're doing and have them help you promote that. And I think a lot of times in athletics, where athletes fall short is they don't necessarily understand the resources that they have at a university and use that to the best of their ability. I'll never forget when I was in college, my roommate at the time, when the basketball team would go on road trips, he had to sit out, he transferred. And so he had to sit out. When the team would go on the road for road games, he would go to New York. Now, I went to the University of Hartford in Connecticut, and he would go to New York and go meet with alums. And I never understood that. Like, why are you going to meet with these people? And he would always say to me, like, yo, man, you don't understand. When I'm done playing, these people are going to be the ones to help me. And I think a lot of student athletes fall short of that. Now, he saw the bigger picture and used that to his advantage. So now when time came for him to graduate, he tried to go play overseas. It didn't work out. He had a job at NBC Universal waiting for him. And that was just built off of the connection that he got with the alums, reaching out to them, just saying, hey, how you doing? My name is such and such. I play here at the University of Hartford. And what you find is that the alums want to be tied to players, whether good or bad. Now, we have to decipher which way we're going to take it. But in his particular case, he used it for the good. And now he's about 10 years removed from playing, and he's one of the head guys over at CBS Chicago. So I say that to the young man I spoke to at Rider, who's promoting this product. Hey, use the school. Reach out to somebody that was here when you were here and say, hey, this is what it is I'm trying to do. Maybe that person doesn't know somebody, but I can assure you they know somebody else that they can put you in touch with to get where it is you need to get to. And I think a lot of times, like I said, student athletes just fall short of that, of reaching out to their network to help them get to where it is they want to get to. So I think that's very important. That's something that we tell our guys. And like I said, it's rough. They'll tell an 18 to 22-year-old, hey, go tell Professor such and such good morning. Nah, Coach, you tripping. I'm not doing that. No. Trust me. You say good morning, that good morning will go a long way, because you have no idea how that professor can help you 10 years down the road.
And I think that's extremely important. And I think that that's a skill or a trait. Things like that should be taught no different than study tables being implemented into programs. And I don't know if you got a couple nuggets or a couple suggestions or a couple ways that you think that can become a universal thing in our profession, Coach, because for our coaches that's on here, they constantly looking to ways to grow themselves, ways to build their brand, ways to make their programs better. And sometimes they take for granted the importance of teaching students how to do that, because that's a skill. So is there anything along the way, and even you, Dr. Greg, to where, or the institutions you've been in that had like personal skill development put in place and networking? Because me as a player, I played 2 sports in Division I, basketball and football. I thought I was going to somebody's league, right? And I had a roommate who had 2 constructive knee surgeries, and he was visiting the president. And I'm like, dude, what is you doing? Why are you over there? And I wasn't mature enough at the time to understand the value of networking. But had I had leadership tell me, or a program in place to show the importance of it, I think I could have potentially set myself up to be better, not saying that I was bad. So I think it's a skill and a program that should be put in place by college coaches. What's your perspective on it? I'm sorry.
Doc, if you don't mind, I'll take that
Go
one
ahead.
first. Well, for us here at Ryder, and you know, Coach Lewis, we spoke about this in our conversation. We're a little different, right? So at the mid-major level, you don't really see 4 minority coaches on one staff. It's unheard of, right? Whatever the reason may be. But we take that to heart. So when our guys do come here, we sit down with them and explain why it is important to go network. And just something, just a small, like I said, just saying good morning. We had a young man do that. He was a freshman for us this year, you know, from the inner city, didn't come from a good situation. And he had never said good morning to anybody. So I sat him down in the office and just said, hey, man, why don't you walk across campus? Next time you walk to class, just tell somebody good morning. Nah, coach, can't do that. So, yo, try it. Let me know how it goes. A couple weeks later, I totally forgot I had this conversation with him. He runs in my office. Coach, you're not going to believe this. I said, what's up, man? Yo, I told somebody good morning. And he's saying it with a smile on his face. Yo, I told somebody good morning. I said, oh, that's nice. Coach, guess what? What's up? They said good morning back. It made his day. And from that point on, he just kept saying it. And his thing was like, hey, coach, listen, nobody ever told me that. So, like I said, that's something as small as that is something that we really take pride in showing our guys that, hey, man, you're here for your athletic ability, but that's not just who you are. Another thing we did was all of us have our master's degrees here, but we got them from Ryder. So it was funny because some of the classes that we would have had some of our players in it. And it showed them that, yo, you know what? They're not just talking just to talk. They're having the actions of going to class with us. Our guys would see us in our offices during a break, studying for an exam, putting a paper together. And I thought moving forward, that was the best example that we could give to show them that, hey, basketball, or for in our case, basketball, is what you do, it's not who you are. And, you know, for some of the guys we have, it gets through quicker than others, but they've all come back since I've been here at some point and said, hey, coach, you know what? I didn't understand it, what you were saying at that time, but I get it now. Thank you. And for me, that's bigger than winning games because you know that eventually the ball's gonna stop bouncing, they're gonna stop playing whatever sport it is they're playing. But if they can come back and tell you, thank you, you've done your job. And then especially now moving forward, when they get that good job and they come back and then they can tell the stories to the other guys that are coming and they're paying it forward to them as well. Biggest compliment you can get as a coach. So that's what it is we try to do here.
And coach, I commend you for that. I'll, you know, again, I've hired a lot of coaches, been around a lot of coaches. I know you have an all Black staff there. I know how difficult that can be. I hired a lot of Black people at Eastern Michigan University, and Travis probably would know this, but I even had the board of trusts, the chairman of the board told me how top heavy we were getting with people of color at one point. And so that's real. I hired we're the only athletic department like this. It was myself, the head basketball coach was black. And when we had to fire him, we hired another one who was black. We had a black football coach. We had a black SWA. But what really got people riled up was when I hired the black baseball coach. And he was only the second one in the country at the time. And I actually only hired him. He was in the search prior to that. I hired a white man at first who came in for 10 months, won a championship, went to Michigan State. And then I actually tried to talk Jay out of coming back the second time but I knew he was the best candidate. And so it was interesting how I even had to go about getting him in the door. So again, I commend you for that because it does take courage. It's easy to do it the other way. But at the end of the day, and I've told a lot of coaches this, it's you guys have to keep connecting and doing what you're doing. I told one, this was a white coach. Again, I've hired a lot of people, but he was good about hiring black assistants. But what I noticed about his black assistants was that they weren't connecting with the black athletes in particular. And that really disturbed me. And of course, the white coach wouldn't notice. He wouldn't know that. He doesn't know connection. He doesn't know. But I was getting some complaints from some of the players that were filtering up. And so I knew a lot of this information. And so I even pulled him to the side one time and I said, I've just never seen black coaches who don't connect better with black kids, and kind of pointed them in the right direction on that. So that's very, very critical, all of you. Connection, pointing these guys in a different direction, because we all, I think, missed on the connection game in college. I went to Vanderbilt. I went to school with Ross Perot's kids, with the Frisk billionaires, with the other family that's funded the athletic department to the tune of about $400 million over the past 10 years. And I never connected with them until I was long gone from Vanderbilt, but nobody showed me the way either. So we have to show them the way. We have to let them see how we do it also, and see how we maneuver, see how we handle the donors, introduce them to certain people, and like you're doing at these functions. Don't let them just sit over in the corner with themselves and network with themselves, because that's not where it is. They need to network because, as you know, and it's a small window of time, these people are excited about these young men and women. And so let's get something out of that. Let's use that opportunity, because Coach just made an example of someone who was able to get a job they didn't go pro, but they came back, they got a job, and now they've risen in the industry. And I tell people all the time, at Vanderbilt, I've been working 28 years. Nobody's ever asked me what my degree was in, and nobody's ever asked me what my GPA was. Now, I know some jobs are different or whatever, but a lot of times it depends on who you connect with. And if you connect with the right people, as long as you have that piece of paper going in the door, it's going to help your chances.
I want to shift into another role. There was a question in the chat. And Kareem, do you got the question pulled up? My internet had went out and came back in. If you got that name, I'm gonna have them ask that question. But then I want to shift, Dr. Greg. I want to shift, Coach, into your personal image, your personal position. Because when I first started doing this, I was on the Rising Coaches Networking platform, and we have this meeting every Friday with members. And I said, man, when we're gonna talk about the things that people don't really want to talk about. And then George Floyd happened, right? After I had agreed to kind of put this together, then George Floyd happened. And then I had a lot of my white friends, where I think I'm their only black friend, ask me like, man, I don't understand. I don't get it. So I want to shift into that, but I want to cover, before we shift, I want to cover the question that was in the chat first.
Yeah, Coach Allen, are you still there? Go ahead, Coach Allen.
Hello, fellas. My name is Stemon Allen, assistant men's basketball coach at Allen Community College up in Iola, Kansas. My question is, why is it that so many students, particularly from the inner city, like go to school and play basketball, but once they leave, they kind of figure it out? Is it up on the coaches to like kind of build that relationship so that they understand like, hey, the ball is gonna stop bouncing, and when it does stop bouncing, you need to make sure that you put yourself in a great situation to be successful. Because I feel like when I was in college, I never understood like if basketball stopped, what would I do, and what is the possibilities for me. I understood that once I left college. Not saying it's not too late, but I wish I would have learned that in college. I wish I would have had a coach teach me those type of life lessons along with the basketball lessons, I think that would have installed a more well-rounded person sooner than later. That's my question.
You want to take it first, Doc? Go right ahead, man.
All right. Well, I think it just goes right back to what we're putting in their heads early on. And it is incumbent upon you, again, as coaches, no matter what level you're on, no matter what school you're at, you're affecting these young men and women more than anybody. Trust me. Now, I know it's a big deal when I'm in the room and the athletic director is Black, and I'm the only Black athletic director in the conference. So I know that's a big deal. I know what I mean to the industry. I know how the Black athletes sit up a little taller when I walk in the room. I understand the effect I'm having. So when I have their attention, I have to give them the real and give them the facts. And I'm not here to crush anybody's dream, but there's only one Michael Jordan. We just saw a 10-series deal on him on ESPN. He's the GOAT, you know, and then Kobe and whoever. But all of us aren't going to be that. We're not even going to be close to that. So you got to start out, hey, chase your dream. And I always tell these guys, chase your dream when you're young. And just like Travis said, Carlos, who was our point guard back in the day, he's still playing ball, but he's playing overseas. He's chasing his dream. He's still loving it. He's not an NBA guy, but he's been able to make a living, has a great family and all that, but he's going to have to stop playing too. And it doesn't matter who you are. You know, I'm 50 years old now. I haven't played basketball since about 1998. That's real, because I almost tore my Achilles trying to do it. But you have to stop. And I used to be a big time athlete too. And I think I'm able to at least identify with the guys and say, hey, you know, and I show them pictures of myself when I played we played at Tennessee in front of 100,000. Say, I wasn't just on the bench, I was out there. But now here I am, an older man, talking about when I was young 30 years ago. And one day you're going to be just like me. So I think it's in what you translate. And getting back to what I said about your impact on these young people's lives, you saw I just stepped away from the camera a minute ago because I got a call from one of my best friends. He said, hey, Coach Dugan just died. Coach Dugan was my high school coach. And I had to collect myself because that man got me into the Hall of Fame down there. And, you know, I'm trying to remember when the last conversation is that I had with him. And so that's the type of effect that you all have on these guys. And one day somebody's going to say, hey, Coach X, you know, he's sick or he passed away. And then you start coalescing around what those people did for you. That's the type of impact that you have to leave on these people, and build them into something greater than yourselves.
I totally agree with that. Stedman, I would even say this too, man. It's got to go both ways a little bit. So, and what I mean by that is, okay, a lot of times, you know, student athletes, you know, the ones that can play football, play basketball, they come from the inner city, right? Where resources are very limited. But having that mindset of understanding that I don't want to come back to this. So how can I control that part? And that's like, you know, what Dr. Greg said, go into class. You know, think about how many times, you know, because we're all guilty of it. Being a student athlete, we go to class and we sit in the back of the class, or we come late, or we don't show interest. Those are all things that the player can control, right? Now, let's take it a step further. You have a coach who probably looks like you, came from the same situations that you came from, as someone that you can look up to. And like I said, I get it. You know, 18 to 22 years old, it's a tough time, tough period, right? But what you'll end up seeing is there are more people that are like you that want to make it out. It's who you choose to follow, I think. The same way I looked at my roommate in college and, you know, didn't understand of, you know, why are you going to these meetings? Why are you going to meet that person? And I didn't get it until he said, hey, man, I'm flying into New York from Dallas. Oh, who you coming to meet? Somebody from NBC. And it was like, yo, you know what? Now I understand why you were doing that. Why you would go take those meetings. And this dude was a great player, all conference player. But, like Dr. Greg said, he tore his ACL his senior year, and that was it for him. But he had those meetings to fall back on. And he had a guy in Larry Harrison, who was the coach at the University of Hartford, to look up to say, hey, you know what? That guy looks just like me, came from the same situation I came from. Now, I'm able to put aside my differences that he may have with me on the court, because think about that. A lot of times players get caught up in their feelings of, all right, coach is coaching me too hard, but now I'm not going to go talk to him, right? Think about how many times that happens. They get caught in their feelings when it's like, hey, man, it's nothing personal on that court. A lot of time when coaches are recruiting kids and they sit down in their house, sometimes, someone hits you with the BS just to get you. There are a lot more coaches that are actually genuine out there that want to see those guys succeed, those women succeed, and they're going to do what it is they need to do to get them there. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with playing. But, I think it's a two-way street. Student athletes, they got to let their guards down, which is tough, because of the situations that they may have come up in. But you got to be willing to let go and say, hey, let me take a chance on this person. And then they can get me to where it is I need to get to. I did that. It wasn't easy. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, East New York section of Brooklyn. And I didn't know it was bad until I got to college and somebody asked me, yo, where are you from? And I told them I'm from East New York. Oh, wow. How'd you get to college? It was what I thought I was supposed to do. So from there, seeing the college atmosphere, I knew that I didn't want to go back to where it was I came from. And that's what motivated me. And then I found the right people, whether it was coaches, mentors, professors to stay in touch with. And I think if we can educate our student athletes on that, it'll help, because that's where they fall short, because it just doesn't look cool at that particular time to, hey, let me go befriend this person.
Now, Coach, as we shift and you go in that direction of just things you're thinking about or things that you were a part of growing up and your perspective on things, give us some insight on being that writer, being on an all-black staff, the good, the bad, the ugly, maybe an example of some things that you may have went through that you think contributed to an all-black staff, and more so just to shed some light on what it is to be on an all-black staff in America. Is no different than what it is to be a black male in America during these times. We were on here last week, and Wendell Farrell, one of my teammates, is a women's coach at Cal, and he said, man, to him, he feels like 3 weeks ago, black people showed up to America. Like it was an afterthought, right? We wasn't even thought of. Like, oh my God, there's black people here. So the questions start like, man, what is it like to be black? The thing that I showed earlier about the uncomfortable conversations that was done by Dr. Greg's son. So just give us some light on that. Give us some insight just on some things, some struggles that you may have, some benefits to things in the program.
Well, it's funny how we got to that point. We had an opening on our staff, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. My boss called and said, hey, man, I'm thinking about hiring such and such. I didn't think anything of it. And I said, all right, cool, no problem. And then maybe about 10 seconds later, I called him back and I'm like, hey, man, you sure you want to hire such and such? And he was like, hey, wow, what's wrong with him? Do you not like him? Nah, I think he's great, but you do know we got 4 black guys on the staff now. And he said, yeah, I didn't think of that. He was just the right candidate for the job and I thought would fit in. And since he's been here, it's been great. But now, like you said, we do know what comes with that. We got to win. Guys got to do well in the classroom, and they can't get in trouble off the court. We checked all 3 of those boxes. We just graduated 6 seniors. We had 13 guys in total. 9 guys finished with a 3.0. We won a lot of games. In my opinion, We would have went to the NCAA tournament this year if the pandemic didn't hit. But what we looked at with having that was we're giving a chance to other people, to other schools at the mid-major level to see, you know what? 4 minorities on one staff can get it done. And it doesn't have to be in the MEAC, doesn't have to be in the SWAC. And by no means is that a knock to any of those schools in those programs. We're just as qualified as our counterparts to do the job and do it well. Now, do we have to go above and beyond? No question. But I think if you asked all of our players, they would tell you that, hey, you know what, those coaches, they loved us. They did everything that they said they were gonna do as far as making sure we got our degree. And they all left here with degrees. And like I said earlier, the biggest thing that they hit us with was, hey, thank you for giving me that chance. You know, because we had a couple guys, they came from checkered past, and they all left here with a degree in May. And like I said, there were nights where it wasn't easy. You know, you got to stay up with them, whether it's they want to talk or they got situations going on at home. You know, so all things that we handle as coaches behind the scenes. But for us, being an all minority staff, we took it to heart to make sure that we got the job done because we knew of the opportunity that was being presented to us, and that hopefully one day there's another staff in the country that does the same thing.
Dr. G, I would just like to hear you reflect on the thought process and the mindset behind him and everything that Coach just talked about as far as the staff even having to feel that way.
Well, you know, obviously with me being the only Black athletic director in the conference, me being the only Black senior administrator on campus, I'm in vogue now. I'm needed, I'm wanted. I am the, you mentioned the racial equality action group that we have for the conference. I'm chairing that. I just had my first meeting. I'm chairing the vice president for diversity and inclusion search here on campus. I'm in the middle of that. But I've been in this space and operated in it since day one. And again, I've been doing this 28 years, but I identify as a Black man first. And I identify with our student athletes of color, and I've never backed away from that. All the initiatives that you maybe been involved in or heard about with the NCAA, the coaches academies, BCA coaches of excellence back in the day before the BCA went out of business per se, I've always participated in it. And so, you know, and it's an unprecedented time. But what we have to do, and in particular with our young folks, is we have to strike while the iron is hot. So one of my fraternity brothers is interesting. He coined this phrase. He said the other day, he's a professor out at Cal Poly Pomona. He said, you know, we're about to start getting some invisible reparations. And so remember that phrase, invisible reparations, meaning, and he said, you know, brothers and sisters are about to start getting promotions now. They're about to start getting some titles now. In my business, they're probably about to get tenure a little bit easier than they may not have to jump through all the hoops that they've had to jump through. But there's going to be a limited amount of time that kind of stuff goes down, I think, before people kind of want to push away from this because they're already tired of talking about it. As you can see, when you can see some of the comments under, let's say when Kansas State's football team decided that they were going to boycott because they want a kid kicked out of school because of the derogatory things that somebody posted publicly, you know, a student, and then you start seeing all the comments that's written out after that. Hey, get rid of those kids, you know, pull them off a scholarship, next person up, all the negative things that's going towards them. People are already tired of hearing about this. It's just like you said, about 3-4 weeks ago, we all showed up. People noticed that we were here, but now we're showing up and we're being demanding. And this, and I grew up on the tail end of the civil rights movement. My mother, along with a handful of other Black students, integrated a high school down in Huntsville, Alabama in 1965, an experience that she won't even talk about to this day, but she's a pioneer. And since then, it's in my blood too. I've been the first and only Black person, whatever title I had, first Black at Arkansas on the senior staff, first Black athletic director to go to the University of Tulsa. When we played football at the University of Virginia in 2010, it was the first time in the history of football that there were 2 black athletic directors and 2 black football coaches basically on the field at the same time. So we're still first. And, you know, but now we have to try to capitalize on that, put ourselves in position to get some of the things that we should have gotten a long time ago. So like I commend the staff there with Coach, because it's not easy to do that. And my own coach, Frank Haith, who's our basketball coach, after our second year, we went to the NCAA tournament and he did the exact same thing. And he came to me first and he said, "Hey boss, you know, what do you think about us having an all black staff?" I said, "Well, hey, you just went to the NCAA tournament. Let's go for it." Because what comes with that is you have to have success. So he was able to point to some success. Nobody said a word. Now, if he had a hobbled in there and we had just gone 3-15 in the conference, it's probably a different conversation. So, and at the end of the day, know this: we are judged collectively. We get what Fitzhill used to say when we were at Arkansas together. He said, we get one shot, we get one opportunity, one shot, one kill. And so we have to make the most of that, you know, and I thank God that I've been able to be an athletic director for 15 years. That's unusual. Outside of Gene Smith and probably Ward Manuel at Michigan, I'm probably the longest tenured athletic director in the country on this level, 2 different schools. But that's very hard to do. So when we get these positions, let's not be afraid to look back and pull. Don't close the door behind you. You know, pull somebody up with you.
I want to stay with you for a second, Dr. G, just from the standpoint of we are about to get more opportunities, right? And you mentioned that. So as a leader, with the amount of time that you've led as a black male, going, I guess, back to the Eastern Michigan days of you hired a black head coach for football, you hired a black head coach for basketball, you hired a black head coach for men's and women's basketball, for baseball. You got some pushback. How does being in a leadership role as a black male impact your leadership decisions? And what strategies, techniques, or methods have you used to help that decision-making not be blurred in the fact of, well, I can't do that because I'm black?
Well, you have to be smart, and you have to be, if you're going to be a leader in this space, you have to be a politician as well. And you have to line up, just like we've been talking about connecting, you have to connect with the right people. Because before I hired that black baseball coach, I sat out at the country club with our black trustee, who you may remember, his name was Jim Stapleton. And the board of trust, who had already told me, the chairman who had already told me we were getting a little top heavy, we're sitting down having a couple of drinks at the country club so he could bless that idea. And so I got him on board before I took it to everybody else. And I kind of had his support because I knew I couldn't walk in the room and not have him on the team. Now I had to do something for him. He wanted me to elevate somebody that was already on my staff and change their title and all that. And I did that. But I was playing, you know, the collaboration game, the cooperation game. Sometimes you have to give up something to get something. But at the end of the day, the last thing, and you also have to remember this, you're going to get fired based on what the results are, or you're going to get elevated based on what the results are. So why would you do it based on everybody else's opinions or choices and everything? Because at the end of the day, I'm going to get terminated based on who was hired. Nobody's going to know what the story was behind the scenes and what went down and why I just hired this person because so-and-so told me so to do it. So you have to remember that you have to have the courage to stand by the decisions you make. I make decisions. People ask me this all the time. How do you make decisions? I make decisions that allow me to sleep at night. All right, first and foremost. So that means I'm doing the right thing. And when we hired this, here's a behind the scenes story, and I'll shut up after this. When we hired Rob Murphy to replace Charles Ramsey, I got a call from it was 2 black trustees, and I got a call from one of them that we had interviewed everybody. And hold on, my phone keeps ringing. We had interviewed everybody, and it was the day of commencement. So the president and the president and the board got up and left the president's house, and they went over to graduation. So one of the trustees who was black texted me, and he said, "Hey man, why do I have this guy keep calling me?" He said, "Hey man, if it's going to hurt your career," he said, "because you've hired a lot of black people, you've done what you need to do for the cause. If it's going to hurt you to hire Rob, let's just go with the other guy." And I forgot who the other candidate who came out of that was. And what I told him was, I said, "Listen, I said, I understand that there's 2 levels of governance above me. So, but I'm going to recommend Rob. And if it gets stopped at the president's level, or if it gets stopped at the trustee level, hey, I did what I could do, but I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to recommend Rob. Now it worked out and Rob is still there 6, 7, 10 years later. So it worked out, but I stuck to my conviction and I made that decision based on what I thought was best for the program at the time. And if it got knocked down, at least I know going into the end of the situation, they know what I wanted to do and they supported me. But sometimes that doesn't happen.
Perfect. Great insight. Just appreciate the realness from both Coach and Doc. Are there questions? We got about 20 minutes left to be respectful with time. Any questions for Coach or Doc in any regards to anything we've talked about or anything that you want to ask?
I'll ask a question. And this is for either of you guys really, but a lot of times, speaking back earlier with Coach Travis, he talked about degrees. Like a football team, they have 150 student athletes and they tend to major cluster their guys. And so how do we kind of stop coaches from major clustering, and wanting to get those kids degrees? And even basketball, because coaches want to practice at a certain time. And so they try to figure out majors that will coincide with one another so that the schedules line up. And, it may not work for the kid who's a biology major that has a 5 o'clock lab and you have to practice at 3 o'clock, or just a pre-law major, just as examples, like how do we kind of balance that?
I'll take that one first. I think it kind of goes with what Dr. Gregg said, right? So he got his degree in something that he's not even necessarily doing right now. And I think that's important. What we try to do with our guys, and Coach Lewis and I spoke about this, the communication degree, right? That's the thing that everybody technically says, when you look up a student athlete's bio, majoring in communication, right? And I don't like that either, but I get it. But now I say this to that student athlete: don't let that define who you are. Go out and build those connections with somebody you may have an interest in learning about. I know for me, when I first got to college, I had no idea what it was I wanted to do. And then I fell into the communication major, but then I made it my emphasis to be a journalism major. But now that didn't just stop there. I would go, scour through the internet, look for internships. And it just so happens that ESPN found me as a student to go intern with them. I didn't find them, they found me. Till this day, I still have no idea how they got my resume, but they did. I called, went out there, spoke with them, interned for 2 years. They offered me a job before I got into coaching. Turned them down 2 times because it just wasn't what I wanted to do. But to answer your question, I said, you go and you make your own opportunity. We all know at some point what it is we want to do, but how do we go about creating that opportunity for us? You got to go out and get it. And it's the case with anything else. When we're trying to go get a job, you go out and get what it is you want. And you may have to settle for something just to get to where it is you want to get to, but don't stop until you reach what it is that you want. There are time constraints due to practice time and things of that nature. But after practice is over, especially now having phone access, social media, you can get connected to who it is you want to get connected to.
And I'll add to that. And sometimes, as the coaches have to be savvy about what's going on. I just had the same conversation. Somebody on the panel brought up the fact that, and we all know it, sometimes professors have classes at the exact time that athletes are practicing because they don't want them in their classes. They don't want them majoring in what their profession is and what their expertise is. So what they did at Vanderbilt, they were good about it. And again, I didn't last long in engineering, so I was only in labs like the first year and a half, but we had football practice on Monday nights because all the labs were taking place at Vanderbilt during the day on Monday. So the coaches made sure that they staggered practice and changed it to fit all the guys who needed to go to lab during the day. So we just flipped it. We started having practice. We had practice under the lights. I don't think a lot of people were doing that. And so sometimes you have to be mindful of what's going on with the schedule, tune in to what's going on. And if you, and like nursing students right now, especially on the female side, it's hard for student athletes to major in nursing, but we found creative ways to do that within our curriculum by flipping some of those courses and coaches. And I know you don't want to have practice at 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes, but sometimes you may have to. Sometimes you may have to go at 7, depending on what's going on with your own student athletes, to help them get involved with some of those majors that usually some of those time blocks don't allow for.
You know what, Doc, if I could piggyback off what you just said.
Sure.
We kind of do that here, and it's for that same reason. So we practice from 9 to 12 in the morning, which for us as coaches is a little tough, but it happens. And that's more so done from the standpoint of our players having more options, like Dr. Greg said, just to have more options and dabble into a major that they would like to do. And if it's something that interests them, we promote it. We try to find a way to make it happen. Now, obviously, some majors are tougher than others, but prior to me coming to Rider, I never heard that guys practice in the morning. But it's been great. Our players thrive in that kind of, situation to be up early, and it allows them to have flexibility to do things after class, meet with groups, get papers done, things of that nature. So, that's done purposely here to have practice from 9 to 12 and give them the rest of the days to themselves.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me? Hey, Mark, good job, man. This question is for Dr. Greg. Being that there'll be an influx in opportunities for minorities coming up, as you stated, what are a couple points or a couple of things that you would suggest that when we are hired, that we do? Like,
did y'all get the last part of that
question?
Give
me like three keys as to what we should do when we get the job. Excuse me?
3 keys.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. 3 keys to if you were able to get an opportunity and you get hired. 3 things that you should do right off the bat.
Right off the bat, right off jump. And by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Serge Clement. I coach at Marist College, same conference as Ryder.
Fantastic. Well, I think it depends on what position. Like if you get a head coaching position, obviously, or an assistant coaching position, I think we miss on networking within the department, because you never know when one of your coworkers is going to be your next opportunity. There are a lot of senior associates. I was a senior associate before I became an AD, so I remember who the good coaches were, and I have reached back and interviewed some of them for head coaching positions. Get to know who the big dogs are, even if you're an assistant coach. We have a man named Mike Case at our athletic department. Mike Case's name is on the football building. Well, it would be silly for everybody not to know who Mike Case is, whether you coach basketball, football, baseball, whatever it is. Really get to know them. And then another thing you have to do, besides, of course, continue to educate our people, is you have to continue to grow yourself, continue to grow your own brand. I tell all now, and we're being watched. People of color, don't think that it's the same rules for everybody else. Everything that you've seen and been involved with, it's the same thing. Once you get to this level too, especially if you're a head coach, everything you're doing is being watched. I remember when I became a senior administrator for the first time at the University of Missouri. I'll never forget this. I was 25 years old, so that was almost 25 years ago. And I was replacing Damon Evans, who is now the AD at Maryland. So Damon's always been one step ahead of me. It was kind of a competition thing, but we're great friends. And we were very young in that. And I went to a function, and I remember the next day, one of the senior associates who was a lot older than me, he said, you know, that Derek Gragg, he really likes his beer. And I said, well, you know, I like my beer. I was counting them too. I think I drank 2, but this guy drank maybe 6. But he spun the narrative, and it became and he used to call me Hot Shot. So what I realized at the end of the day was he was really kind of hating, you know. So you have to really watch. I tell coaches all the time when I speak at these academies, watch how you socialize when you're around a mixed group of people, because everybody in that room is not for you. Some of them don't want to see you in that room. Some people to this day can't get over the fact that I'm still the athletic director here. And you know why I can tell it? I never get on the blogs, but if you want to see how bad you are as a coach or as an AD, get on the blogs and see what people have to say about you other than your own student athletes, the own people around you, your own circle, which should be closed. But watch how you socialize, watch who you let into your inner circle, and stick with people who have your best interest at heart. Now, I can't all be black either. You have to, and I say that there's a fourth thing. Network with people who don't look like you, because a lot of times they're going to get some opportunities, and we're getting opportunities now, and I think we're going to be able to capitalize off of that. But the majority has always gotten opportunities, and they've always gotten more opportunities than we've gotten, but they put yourself in a position where they can help you. So don't just network with our own people, stretch yourself and get out of your comfort zone as well.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I have a question. This is for Marlon and Dr. Graggs. For one, Marlon, man, the story that you said, man, we all went back to school, man. I thought that was pretty awesome. I ain't never heard nothing like that. So definitely kudos to you and your staff. But just piggybacking off what you just said, Dr. Graggs, in regards of networking and getting not only established relationships with African Americans, I feel like it's sometimes sort of hard to, get their respect or find something to talk about. Like for instance, if I see one of you guys out, we got something to talk about because we're both Black. But sometimes I feel like that is challenging if that's not the case. And if you guys can just give some suggestions, or I'd like to just hear you guys' intake on that.
Hey, Coach, you want to go first on that?
Sure. I'll give you things you can control, right? How you doing? Nice to meet you. You'd be surprised at their thought process with you saying that. Because what it'll be is this, and they won't say it out loud. Oh, wow, he can hold a conversation. Starts there. Something as small as that. How's your day going? Hi, I'm such and such from wherever. Let that be your intro. And then from there, you can kind of dictate where you want the conversation to go. You've already gotten over the biggest hurdle, and that's getting them to know you just by introducing yourself. Start there, see where it takes you, man.
And I'll add to that, it's an extension of that. And I've mastered it because I'm sort of an introvert. I'm an introverted extrovert, meaning I'd rather just be left the hell alone most times. But we're not in that type of business. You have to network. You have to smile and go in the room and light the room up. The thing about, and I've studied this, the thing about introverts though is it takes a lot of our energy. So when I come home and I crash on the couch, my wife knows that, well, it must have been on one of those high energy days. He had to be extroverted. He had to get on the stage. He had to talk to donors. He had to do all these things. But the thing that I've learned about people is they love to talk about themselves. So you can get into a conversation with someone and not hardly have to say anything except for how was your day, or what is it that you do, or I heard that you do, or can you tell me a little bit more about how you got to be where you are now, and let them talk. Because you've talked to coaches, you've talked to other coaches, you've talked to coworkers, you've talked to student athletes all day. Sometimes you're talked out, but you can let them talk and they'll walk away from the conversation and say, I really had a good conversation with that person when they did all the talking. And so in that same vein, you have to learn how to be a good listener, pick up on some things where you can keep leading the conversation and ask another question, and then ask another question. And then by the time you've gleaned a lot of information from them, and you haven't had to say a whole lot about yourself or a lot about what you're doing. And you can kind of pick and choose to throw in things that you may want them to know about you. So it's an art to it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think we got time for one more question. If anybody got a question.
Yeah, I got one.
Question.
Who's that?
You could go, Kareem.
Yeah, Dr. Greg and Marlon, kind of for you, both, any of you guys. What's kind of some thoughts on, I guess, prior to that college? Because obviously we've all kind of hearing the same stories about, hey, I got this degree, I got that degree. But what are some thoughts you think prior to college that we can, I guess, have youth, and especially those high school years where their thought process is outside of sports, entertainment, and music, and where they have a broader idea of that there are more things in life than just those three things coming out of, inner cities.
I went first on the last one. I'll let you start. Follow behind.
Yeah, it's the same thing that with the college kids, I think. Come at them a little bit differently. We know we master sports and we master entertainment and all those things, but tell them they need to start from the jump, trying to broaden their perspective, because when they get to college, there are going to be other things they have to be more in tune with or more educated on. And I think we also have to preach the same thing to the parents or to the supporters or to the AAU coaches, to the high school coaches, which I know in basketball sometimes become obsolete, but even with them, whoever is affecting the kids around, the kids' inner circle, it's the same thing. Because at the end of the day, it's the same thing with the high school kid. Even if you do become Zion's not going to be able to play basketball 20 years from now. It's just a fact. So let's look at how we can broaden ourselves. And now with the internet, what's your brand? How you working on things? Your education can carry you a long way also. Like Coach says, they all have master's degrees. And sometimes there's a thin line in your future where you're going between who gets hired. So it could be the fact that someone had a bachelor's degree and a master's. So start talking about, hey, once you get your bachelor's degree in college, you don't have to stop there. Get your MBA, get your law degree, get a graduate degree. Start putting these things into these young people's heads very early on, because a lot of times they're not hearing that. They're hearing what time is practice, what time is the game, where are we going? But just sprinkle some of that other knowledge in there as much as you can to get them to thinking about maybe a STEM career, or what does this mean, or what does that mean, other than just basketball or sport.
I totally agree with that. And Kareem, I'll say this, I just try to give my own life example. So I have a 6-year-old son, and to be honest with you, I would be ecstatic if he didn't play basketball. Now, right now, that's all he does because that's what dad does. But prior to him going through this basketball craze, he was into dinosaurs. And I had no idea what a paleontologist was. I couldn't even spell it, right? But he taught me some stuff, over the last couple of years, different dinosaur names and things of that nature. And that is what he wanted to do. So I think, like Dr. Greg said, now, kudos to my wife for that, because she's the smart one of the two of us. And she knew that, hey, athletics would be in his future, but let me give him something else. And that's where those influencers come into play. She gave him dinosaurs, he picked it up, but now he can do both. He can go be a basketball player, but he can also go be a paleontologist. And to be honest with you, I want him to go be the paleontologist because at some point I'm going to get old, I'm going to retire, and I'm going to be broke. And he's going to be richer than I am. So I need to get some money from him. So hopefully he sticks with that. But I think the influencers are very important, for kids coming up to see.
Good. Stedman, did you have one real quick before?
Yes. I'm just curious to know, what do both of you guys do in your personal life to become better leaders, to constantly grow and just perfect your craft as a coach, as an AD, and also as a man?
You know, for me, I study the greats. And I was on a football Zoom call with maybe 500 assistant coaches last week. And I told them, and most of them were Black. And I said, if you haven't read everything that Tony Dungy has put out, you're not being serious. You know, whether it's John Wooden, you know, you can go right down the line. And today, I love documentaries. So I love history. I love studying on great teams, great programs. There's so many things out there today that you can access on YouTube. TED Talks are very educational, but learn something, again, that stretches you. Get outside your comfort zone, study the greats. And it's interesting because I'm a hip hop head, just like maybe a lot of you are. I grew up in the hip hop era. And it's interesting to me, these young rappers today, they say, well, you know, I don't listen to anybody. I just listen to myself. And I think that's just ignorant. Study the greats. You know, they should be studying people who came before them, who've done it at a great level. And so I'm the same way. I don't know everything. You know, some people study me and that's great, but there are a lot of people, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So it would be ignorant of me not to pick up on some of the things that they've done throughout history and try to interject some of that stuff into today.
I'm going to piggyback right off that. And if my mom heard this, she'd probably be happy, but I do a lot of reading. And it's something I didn't want to do when I was a kid, but now I try to read one book per month, especially now during these times. We got a lot of time on our hands. So I do a lot of reading, do a lot of listening to podcasts. I'm big into that. And, you know, you just try to find different quotes that I'm a big quote guy. If you follow me on Twitter, I got a quote every morning when I wake up. I'm big into that, and I try to pertain it to something in my life. So I do that every day. I'm on a podcast every day. It doesn't have to be sports related. It could be leadership related. Could be mindset related. And then when I go to bed at night, I actually just got this app on my phone. It's called a Calm app. And that, you know, calms me down and puts me at ease to go to sleep. You know, kind of like Dr. Gray, I'm wired up, you know, for some of you that know me. I got a lot of energy, and then I don't like to go to sleep till 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, which is bad. So I listen to the Calm app, and it, you know, brings me down, and I do that on a daily basis. But reading and podcasts are probably the two biggest things that I try to do.
I wanted to get a couple nuggets from you guys, and I think both of you just did it from the standpoint of the purpose of the show is to educate professionals and integrate cultures. So if we could talk cross-culturally and give one or two nuggets to a white assistant coach or a white athletic director or a Mexican assistant coach, a Mexican athletic director. I know we talk a lot of black and white, but what type of things could you give them that could help them be better professionals? Just two things from each of you.
I can go first. I actually heard this saying yesterday on a call that I was on. We had a town hall discussion yesterday, and this line, you know, really encompassed what it is we should all be trying to do. And it was diversity is being invited, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And when I heard it, it just like blew me away, because that's what we all want right now. You know, the diversity is going to happen because everything that's going on now, right? Everybody feels that that's how we have to do things, but that's just being at the party. If I ask you to come dance with me, making it feel like you're invited and we're all getting somewhere. And that has no color, no ethnicity, anything along those lines. So for me, that would be it, what I'd say to everybody.
And you know, and I add to that because I've used that. I used that same line in not a podcast, but when I spoke to about it was 700 administrators on a Zoom call, and I was on the call with the other panelist was the AD at New Orleans, who's Tim Duncan. If you haven't seen the video about him being run down by the police in Boston a few weeks ago, just him and his wife walking down to Whole Foods, which tells you what type of neighborhood they were in. They were going to Whole Foods down the street, and how the police ran down and accosted him. And I was and Candace Lee, who's the AD at Vanderbilt at my alma mater, and we were basically talking about the same thing. We need allies. That's what you tell them. We need allies. It's easy for us to operate in this space because we were born in this space. We've always had to navigate this space. We need them to partner with us and have these difficult discussions, which is the theme of my son and his former teammates video. And it's a 15-minute long video. Whenever you get 15 minutes, I encourage you to watch it. It's very, very interesting the way they put it together. But we need allies, and we need them to stand with us through the test of time. Don't get tired of hearing about these things. Don't get tired of seeing people of color come up in some ways because we're just trying to catch up. And at the end of the day, once you get past being invited to the party and then dancing, you want to be treated the exact same way. So you can get into equality and what social justice looks like. And I'll end it with this. And I've said this in several lectures and conversations over the past few weeks, in that if you flip the races of the people of what's going on today, if that was a white man kneeling under, being held down by 4 black cops, how fast would it have taken them to arrest those guys? How fast would it have taken for them to start getting justice on their end? So that's when you're talking about equality and social justice. We just want to be treated the same way as everybody else is treated. And I tell people in this business, when you get one of these jobs, here's how you break it down simply. You want the same job that the white man or white woman had before you got there. You want the same job. You don't want it to be watered down. You don't want the benefits to be any less. You don't want the pay to be any less. You want the same job because you're going to be required to work harder to keep it. So that's equality and social justice.
Hey, you know what, Coach Lewis, before we wrap up, Dr. Greg, I actually owe you a dinner, man, because I really thought when I was at this town hall meeting last night that a lady came up with that line, but now that I know she stole it from you, we owe you.
She stole it from me.
Okay, there we go. We owe you.
Listen, Coach, Doc, this is great. And for those of you who don't know, me and Coach Gill, right?
You good? We good, man.
Gill. Reading and writing, one of my best subjects. I was a numbers guy. All right, me and Coach Gill met about 2 weeks ago, and a week ago I asked him to join and talk, and I texted him at about midnight. And I'm a person that my mind constantly goes. I'm constantly looking for ways to get better and ways to strive to be the king of the jungle, like I like to tell our players, to where we are, where I become and our program becomes the expectation. But he's been humble through this whole process, and I am greatly inspired by you, Coach, and your staff. I would entrust any of my kids with you and the program that you are a part of, and just to learn from you today and to grow from you today. It has been a very humbling experience. And Dr. G, a few months ago, I didn't know if I was going to be able to get you on here, but to be able to get you on has been a true blessing. For me, you were the keynote speaker. And for those of you that don't know, Dr. Greg, as my athletic director, his wife's wrote a book. He's wrote a book. His son has gotten into some video stuff. He truly sets the standard and expectations for everyone around him to a bar higher than you could ever imagine. And because of that, it constantly pushes me to grow and become and get better. So to have you two on this panel is humbling, and I thank you. And as always, I want to thank Rising Coaches for creating a platform for all of us. So with that being said, hopefully we took something from tonight, and moving forward, I think we're going to do one more show just to recap just everything that we've talked about over the last month, all the topics that we discussed that we found uncomfortable, and then we'll close out. So thank you all. Coach, Doc, appreciate you.
Absolutely. And I'll say the thing about Travis, he's a throwback. There's not a lot of two-sport athletes out there. They don't do it like that anymore. And I think you were the captain of both teams. That's impressive. So watch out for this guy, you college coaches. He wants to be on that level. I think one day he's going to be a head coach. I stand by him. And Coach Guild, it's great to meet you. Let's stay in contact, all right?
Yes, sir. Same here.
All right. Y'all have a good night.
I'm gonna go turn my AC off. I don't know if y'all saw me trim